name is Chris Smit.
And I'm Peter van der Lende. This is Culture Matters in International Business. Today we're going to talk about 9 things you're not getting it. If you have not subscribed, you can do so now on culturematters.com and some other platforms, Chris.
Some other platforms, indeed. Culture Matters would be the best source to go to. But also, if you only want to listen to a podcast recording of this, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify have them. If you want to look at the video recording of this, you can go to YouTube and subscribe there. And you can see us both in action where we are in our subsequent locations. Well, we're going to talk about the 9 signs you're not getting it, and it's culture, stupid. Of course, that was borrowed from Bill Clinton in his presidential race in the 1990s. We have a few of them. We're going to take them one by one. And the first one that we're going to talk about, and I'll take that one, Peter will take the second one, is the so-called Lumberjack Syndrome. The Lumberjack Syndrome. In other words, people tend to think that they don't have time to actually do this. While the lumberjack, and this is the analogy with the lumberjack is chopping away and chopping away and chopping away, and by comes a passerby looking at the lumberjack and asking, "What are you doing?" And the lumberjack looks up and wondering, why do I get this question? It's sweating and sweating and sweating, and the passerby says, why don't you sharpen your axe? It'll go a lot faster. And the lumberjack says, well, I don't have time for that. The analogy with paying attention to culture and cultural differences is that many companies, at least in my experience, and I guess Peter, in your experience as well, they brush over cultural differences way too fast. It's too expensive. It's this, it's that, it's not a priority. If you do not make this a priority, for me, it's the same as not making health your priority. Well, that's the number one, the Lumberjack Syndrome. Number 2, can you take that, Peter?
Yes, you think we're all the same. This is something I come across all the time. Of course, we're talking, for the audience who is not familiar with us, we're talking about cultural differences, especially national culture. So national culture have a number of differences. We use 4 dimensions, but today we're going over 9 signs that you don't get that. One famous one is like, well, we're all the same, right? And we have all the same goals. We all have the same values. Even people tend to think that as well. And we have what you always say, Chris. We have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 nose, and it's kind of all the same. And a striking example is, I think, particularly is when Europeans, North Europeans, especially the Dutch and the Danish, and I've seen it many times, want to do business in the United States. And they come to the United States and it's like, okay, we all speak English relatively well, and we kind of look the same in Copenhagen and Amsterdam, and if you walk around in Atlanta or in New York, it's not that crazy different, so okay, that's all fine. And what you then many times see is people want to sell stuff, and then American says, "This is great, I love it." And then the Danish and the Dutch especially already think that they made their sale, right? And they hop on the plane for the second time, and this is going great. And then 1 year later, 2 years later, nothing happens because they completely misunderstood what the American was trying to say. He was just being polite, like, okay, I'm interested. Maybe we should talk about this more, but that's not what he said. So suddenly it's like, I don't understand them anymore. It's like, what is going on? And maybe that's for a later point that I will make in another example. So maybe you will go to what are we now? The third one.
The third one. Actually, I'm going to use your story as a segue into the third one, because the story that comes with number 3 is that, and it links into what you just said, Peter. I was doing business for Philips Medical. Philips, the light bulb company, have made TVs, etc., and are now concentrating on medical equipment. I did some business in the Netherlands for them, and this part of Philips Medical was led by an American. And once he told me the story, it was kind of funny. He came back from Berlin. They went a trip to Berlin, and he went to see the Berliner Philharmonic Orchestra, classical music, in other words, right? So he comes back and enters the office, and his colleagues are asking, "So how have you been?" I said, "Yeah," and it was fantastic. It was awesome. It was phenomenal. And his Dutch colleagues were like, "How good was it? This was classical music. It was an orchestra. That's all." Anyway, in other words, and it links into what you said earlier. Number 1, 2, 3 is they don't get it, but you do. You're the smart one here, and this links in same with Philips Medical. As I said, I did some work in Boston, typically specifically Andover, where there is a factory, in the south of the Netherlands, and in India. And during the workshops that I did there in those 3 specific locations, I asked all of them separately, if we were to put the project in your hands, so hence the US hands or the Dutch hands or the Indian hands, would it turn out to be better? Would it turn out to be faster? And the funny thing is that all of them said, yes, if you leave it to us, it will be better. So in other words, I get it, but you guys don't get it. Okay?
Yeah.
So moving on to number 4. How's that?
Yeah, number 4. Just as a quick comment, and I mention this book all the time, but I get it and you don't get it is very much described in The Wisest One in the Room, and I talk about naive realism all the time because I love that book, and that talks about that. Like I can observe the world really as it is without any biases, and if somebody else doesn't see it the same way, then that person is biased. And with culture, it's the same thing, right? I am normal. If somebody else doesn't behave according to how I see the world, then that person is not normal. And so I don't get it, they don't get it. So that relates also to the 4th point, or I think we're now at number 5 then, right? I just don't understand them. Is that right?
Yes.
I just don't understand them, which is the equivalent of the same argument. I observe how people do business. I don't understand it, and a good example is, and this relates to, I guess, to one of the dimensions, predictability or uncertainty avoidance. I recall an episode when I was working for the airlines. There was a Sky Team meeting, and now we had Americans, Dutch, French together, Air France, KLM, and it was at that time still Continental Airlines, Northwest Airlines, Delta Airlines, etc. Sky Team. And we said we have a budget and we need to do something with that budget. So today we're going to discuss what to do with the budget. And myself and the Americans were saying, you know what we should do? We should just take that budget and take some action and go to spend it on travel agencies and see if we can produce some sort of an incentive for them to fly more on our airlines as opposed to other airlines within the legal limits, etc. And then the French lady, her name was Françoise, says, no, stop, we cannot do that. There is a handbook at SkyTeam. It's like 100 pages long. We need to read those guidelines based on which we can then come up with a plan what to do with the budget. And then I said, we cannot read 100 pages here together. We need to do something. And if we do something and it doesn't fit in the rules, somebody will come along and say, listen guys, maybe this is not what you should be doing. So I was with the Americans, just do it. The French was like, we need to go through the rules first, and eventually what happened? You can answer the question.
I guess not much in the end.
Not much. So I don't understand them. I didn't understand that. I don't understand them. I didn't understand the French at that point, which happened later in life, in my professional life as well. So that's a good example. So what is another one, Chris?
Another one is, and I want to show a slide for this one. And this is, the terminology is everybody's online. So in other words, we don't need to meet physically anymore. Just open a link like this and a video like that. And it all works out. Of course, during the last couple of years, since we've been growing in Zoom and Teams and all that stuff, it's been, for a percentage of the world, it's become more common. But if you look at the image that we're about to show you, you can actually see that there are really large parts of the world that are totally not connected. think about, okay, yes, the West is connected, the
Unbelievable.
US, Canada, Europe is connected, Australia is connected, but then it starts to slow down. I mean, Latin America, large parts are scarcely connected. I know from my own experience, Guatemala or Guatemaltecos are 65% of the population is online. Really, big parts of Africa are simply not connected, as in zero. And if you add that all up, that number, if you come to the final conclusion, it's getting better slowly but surely. But still, at this moment, only 40% of the world population are actually have access to the internet the way we have access to the internet, simply and everywhere and however we want it. So everybody is online. Again, a false excuse to deny that culture in this case matters. Peter, the next
Yeah.
one for you.
I tried it and it doesn't work. In other words, it all at some point, of course, they all come together. The 9 signs, right? They all relate to each other because I look at you. You're not behaving like I think you should. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's you, of course, right? But then let's do something about it, right?
Huh?
So I see that you are behaving out of the normal because you're not behaving according to the lines of my cultural dimensions. So let's see if I can get Chris where he should be, right? Because I know where he should be. He should be more on my side of things. And yeah, of course, if you try that long enough, then you will see that doesn't work because you're not able to see the other side. You cannot see that the French try to kind of like set the rules first. Let's see what the rules are. So for us, Dutchmen or an American in this case, we're talking about maybe the predictability dimension, right? The uncertainty avoidance. That's overdone. You don't need that. You can just do stuff, and then the rules will come in later, or we adjust ourselves later. So if you then say like, well, at some point I will convince the other, and it doesn't work because you cannot change a culture, then people just back off. This happen to KLM and Alitalia, where you and I both had an episode many years ago. It happens still today in the business that I'm in. I tried it, it does just not work. I tried to convince them and they didn't listen. No, it's not that they didn't listen, they just don't see it the way you do. And that's definitely one of the big 9 signs. What is the next one?
Oh well, I just wanted to pitch in this one. If you're convinced by now that culture does matter, get in touch with us. You can do so by going to culturematters.com. The next one, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more to go. I got a bonus. There's a bonus in the end. They're not 9, but they're 10. And this reads: if I only know some do's and don'ts, then that's enough. And this happens to me pretty much every time when I do a workshop. So I'm asking people, what are your expectations? And okay, I want to understand culture better. Well, that's easy. I want to know something about this and this culture. That becomes a little bit more difficult. And then it always makes it on the list. Give me do's and don'ts. And do's and don'ts are pretty dangerous. The point with do's and don'ts is that they usually are valid, but they depend very much on the context. So what goes in one culture, what's okay to do, doesn't go in the same culture when the context changes. Right? And that's important to realize. So going by life, by your cultural life, or by your cultural competence life, only focusing on do's and don'ts, it doesn't work. There are very few do's and don'ts that tend to be more or less internationally accepted. One of them, for instance, is you never give something typically in collectivistic world, India, Arab worlds, and Asian worlds, you don't give something with your left hand. You always use your right hand. And why is that? Because your left hand is used to actually cleanse yourself. The other thing, which is also generally an Arab thing, Indian thing, Asian thing, is that you don't show the soles of your feet to the other person. So putting up your feet at the end of the day, as you would do in the UK or as in the US, is actually a no-go. I need to take another zip because I've got a frog in my throat. So possibly maybe you can take the other one, Peter.
Yeah, the do's and don'ts, I think, is an important sign that you need to mention, because, well, then just tell me how to shake hands, right? Then, or just I will just ask somebody who has been there to what shouldn't I eat, and what should I do my left hand and right hand, and all these things. Yeah, these are all nice cosmetic things to kind of keep in mind when you go to India or when you go to another country, to keep in mind. But that's not resolving the cultural differences if you want to do business over time. Anyways, while you're taking that sip, I was kind of like wrapping that one up, I guess. Yeah, and my business partner is simply an idiot, or my client, or my vendor, or my potential partner abroad, etc., etc. If these problems persist long enough, and you try to convince the other that they are somehow wrong about something, etc., and that lasts for a longer time, then of course people start to think of others as incompetent, idiots, what have you. So these profanities have been shared with me when I was and still am working in international business. As soon as people do not move your way, and you don't see really that there are cultural differences, yes, then people start to use the word idiot. It's also mentioned again in the book, the wisest one in the room, in Naive Realism. I can see the world how it really is, without bias. If somebody doesn't see it, then that person is biased. We share more information, then the bias goes away. If the bias doesn't go away, then that person has an agenda, or that person is an idiot, right? So that's constantly happening. I mean, what in we always talk about the Dutch and the directness. There was actually an episode where Paul, he was a high-level KLM executive, went on a Northwest flight. This was Northwest Airlines KLM, and he was on that flight, and he hated the flight. He said the service was bad, so he sent an email to his counterpart Phil in Northwest Airlines, and used all sorts of profanities. This service was S, and it was BS, and we need to do something. So people, of course, took that as an offense, and kind of like, this is an idiot. How can you talk to a high-level executive like that? But they got used to each other eventually. Of course, the Dutch and the Americans, and the Dutch are way too direct, etc. But in the beginning, of course, this is my business partner. He's an idiot. How can you talk like that?
Yeah.
What is the next one, Chris?
The next one, the one but last, is you know it, but think it's going to be okay. In other words, you know that there are cultural differences. You are aware of them, but you think in the end, I'm gonna wing it. It'll be fine. I can manage this. And 9 out of 10, indeed, it doesn't work. And the point with this is also is that very often we're not being told. We don't get the feedback of either our client or vendor or whatever business relationship we have, that indeed it was cultural differences that were in between. One reason being is that some people are less direct than the Dutch, and they're more polite, and hence they simply will not tell you. The other reason could very well be is that many people don't realize that the friction between doing business with two individuals or two companies is culturally loaded, or the friction cost is actually caused by cultural differences, which is something that I encounter or have encountered quite often with my clients, and also with the workshops that I did. Is people come to a workshop and I ask them, why are you on this workshop? Do you know why you're here? And then I actually have no idea. And so hence the only thing is they follow, and eventually after a day they realize, and it's now I understand. Now I understand what you mean with these cultural differences. And then you come up with the so-called aha-erlebnis, as in, now I understand why they didn't understand me, or why I got upset with this and this behavior. If you will allow me, Peter, I'll do the last one also. Is it's 2 hours is enough. Okay, so a client comes to me, comes to you, Peter, comes to us saying, okay, we think there's something with culture and cultural differences, and I think we should pay attention to that. And how about if you simply do that for 2 hours? For 2 hours, we will make our people culturally aware. So I'm not going to ask how old you are, Peter, but how long did it more or less take for you to learn how to walk?
Yeah, years.
A year.
Months, but A year, and then I was going to say it took me years to understand really all these cultural differences over time when I went from country to country. But years, yeah, to walk, yes, a year, I guess.
And so, but what I want to say is that walking in and by itself is a really complex neurological, muscular system, and we all manage in about a year, but not in 2 hours. Now, I'm not saying that you can hire us for 2 hours for a year, and we'll never get rid of us. But you certainly are not going to be culturally competent in a period of 2 hours. The story that goes with that, again, goes back to Phyllis Medical, whereby that same American, and typically this is a trait from Anglo-Saxons more so than from Europeans, at least in my experience. Do it quick, do it fast, and just get it over with, and then we can move on. All right. And so this was his approach. This was the approach to the American to me, saying, "Can you do this in a couple of hours?" So we've got a lot of people, but I said, "Well, let's do a pilot. We'll do a pilot workshop, and we're going to do 2 days. 2 days."
Yeah.
And we did 2 days. And at the end of the 2 days, he came to me. He said, "You cannot even do this in 1 day. You need these 2 days. So let alone doing it in 2 hours. You need the time to actually become culturally competent. It does not go fast." Peter, I think we're at the end of this version, this session, Culture Matters on International Business. Any last words from you?
Well, just to add to that last point, people always say business is business. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's all about money. We all have the same objectives, and we always say like, yes, but how to get to these objectives and how to get business done is cultural flavored. And if you don't understand that, then things might go wrong. So there are many signs that things might go wrong. We just went over them. Hopefully, that was helpful.
All right, this is the end. And if you're listening to this only, you can subscribe to the podcast on the different platforms that we have. If you're watching us at this moment, then you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us a review in iTunes. That would be lovely. And if you're watching us, then give us a thumbs up in YouTube. The music that you hear in the background is from Bensound. Check it out at bensound.com. I am Chris Smit.
And I'm Peter van der Lende, and thank you for this episode, Chris. I enjoyed as usual. And you are in Paris, right?
Yes, I'm in Paris. Let me just prove that to you by showing a little purple Eiffel Tower. All right, take care, and we'll see each other in a couple of weeks.
Take care.